So I think we can already make a start. So firstly, very, very many thanks for hosting us here in what I believe is actually one of the most beautiful events in locations in Davos. Lucky us. Even if Google finds it slightly difficult to find, I think we're blessed with a nice hill and some beautiful views. So many thanks for hosting us here. Many thanks for joining us, everybody. And I will, without any further ado, hand over to our Prime Minister to give a short keynote, and then afterwards I will introduce our panel and we can kick off. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for joining in this conversation, and thank you to the audience. Welcome to House of Kosova. We call it Home of Talent because of our talented youth. Average age of the population in Kosovo is 35. Every young woman and man, they speak English, without exception. And 1/3 of them speak, understand well German. And that is thanks to our diaspora, which is mainly located in the so-called DACH region, namely Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. I believe that diaspora is becoming from a social factor for our families and society into a developmental actor. Since ever more entrepreneurs from our diaspora are opening their branches of their businesses, franchises in our country. And in this way, they are building this strong bridge between Kosovo and European Union in terms of both economic investment and trade exchange. Our government in these 5 years, together with hard-working people of Kosovo, whose trust in public institutions is highest ever, managed to increase GDP per capita at a level that is now 3 times higher than 18 years ago when we declared independence, and 6 times higher than in the year 2000, which is the first year after our liberation. So, in a way, we could say that both liberation and independence had this incredible economic dividend, and thanks to freedom, economy is flourishing, and with some of the notable governing programs, we are distributing and redistributing growth to people, especially to those who are most in need, women, children, elderly, but also helping students and entrepreneurs. In this way, annual state budget of Kosovo this year is around 70% bigger than 5 years ago. Likewise, GDP. On the other hand, we managed to tremendously reduce trade deficit by doubling exports, by doubling FDI, and by replacing a lot of imports. Currently, exports of goods, exports of services combined amount to around 50% of GDP. And definitely, our private sector will be export-oriented in the future. And we are doing exceptionally well in tech sector, wood and metal processing, light manufacture, food and beverage, but also we are going to support private sector next 4 years with guarantee investment loans, and at the same time with super labor or super job or super work, I don't know which is the best expression to translate our government intervention, which gives for 6 months minimum wage to every young woman and man from 18 years old to 29 years old. In addition, we're going to do this for all women. Every private business in Kosovo who is going to employ a woman, for first 6 months, we're going to give each month minimum wage, which from January 1st is 425 euros and will become from July 1st 500 euros. We made public education free of charge at every level, including bachelor and master. Only for PhD you have to pay. And we have increased 4 times in comparison to previous governments scholarships for students. In particular, scholarships for women in STEM, science, technology, engineering, maths, have proven to be very fruitful for our academia, but also for private sector. We are investing in security and defense, and especially in the zone where industry and military overlap. We are going to build factory of ammunition and also factory of made in Kosovo drones. As a social democrat, I wouldn't like to invest in defense, but we have to because of geopolitical turbulences and the fact that 1 out of 4 our neighbors does not recognize our independence, namely our northern neighbor Serbia, and has been systematically aggressive towards peace and security, state sovereignty and territorial integrity. Therefore, one of the fields where unwillingly we are forced to invest are our defense capabilities and capacities, including modern technology. And here, I believe, in the next years to come, we should pay most of our attention. Therefore, a point where technology, industry, and military collide. That is a very important point for both future progress and future problems. I wouldn't like to take much of your time with my introductory remarks. I just want to say that Kosovo is a very convenient place in this so-called EMENA region, Europe, Middle East, North Africa, for investments. And the percentage of businesses with foreign ownership increased by 55% in the last 4 years, because there are so many foreign companies who are buying startups in Kosovo. Whereas the overall percentage of businesses registered in Kosovo in last 4 years increased by 26%. So with cheap electricity, with relatively low costs of renting premises, with simple fiscal policy and tax system, which implies only 10% corporate profit tax without taxation of corporate dividends, and without taxation when it comes to importing of raw materials, production machinery, and exports, I think provides an opportunity for those who seek to expand their business and with our country get into a win-win situation. Therefore, in Kosovo, you do not have only talented youth, you do not have only an opportunity for the entire Southeast Europe, but also a government that you can consider a partner.
Thank you very much. I think that was a very nice framing for the panel that we're about to kick off. So with no further ado, I'll introduce very briefly who we are and why we're here and the topics that we would like to bring to the fore and hopefully discuss this evening. I don't think I need to introduce your Prime Minister, but thank you very, very much for the keynote, the opening, and also thank you on behalf of the Foreign Council on Economic Relations. Very nice to be here, and thanks again for your welcome. So, I would also like to congratulate you on your recent election win. I think it's testament to your forward-thinking view, your pro-European view, your pro-business view, that the voters have decided that you are the right person to lead forward in what you say are these future progress and future problematic times. I think that's a very potent and very pertinent kick-off to this discussion. I would also very much like to introduce our esteemed female panellists. So on the far side here, we have Anahita Thoms, partner of Baker McKenzie, and you are an expert in global trade, including export, sanctions, and ESG as well. So thank you very much for joining the panel. And then secondly, in the middle, we have Dr. Tanja Wielgoss, Vice President of the Social Democratic Party Economic Forum in Germany, so the SPD Wirtschaftsforum, and also co-founder and Managing Director of the Stellar Circle. Perhaps you can say a few words to the Stellar Circle in your introductory answers. So thank you both for joining. I would like to kick off, however, with a bit of a framing challenge from my own side. So I think on the eve of Trump joining us in Davos, and the geopolitical milieu being rather invigorating, rather challenging, rather difficult at the moment, the question for our panellists to consider in the back of our minds: why should digitalization in this particular context that we're experiencing today in Davos, this week in Davos and generally, why should digitalization still be on the agenda of national and business leaders? So how do leaders make, for example, strategic digital decisions under geopolitical uncertainty? And then finally, is digital sovereignty a necessity strategically, or is it actually a comforting illusion? And so I think in the context of a discussion, hopefully we can unpick some of those topics. So as I've said, I will kick off with you, Prime Minister, and I think you've given a very nice introduction to why Kosovo is the right place to be for talent, for business, and also for maybe investment in new technologies like defence and the connection to industry. So, youngest population in Europe, highly digitally savvy. I would love to hear from you a little bit about what digital Kosovo means. What are some of the programs and initiatives that you're specifically focusing on, and why is that particularly relevant to today's agenda in Davos?
Well, the government is supporting people because that's its responsibility. So, of course, people lead their lives, but they need support. From healthcare to education to culture and safety. So we provide public services because that's why people put us in our offices in the first place. And we want to increase the quality of these services. We want to increase also accessibility to these services. We want to spare both time and money of our citizens. And definitely digitalization helps all over. So in order to reduce costs and time spent in relation with the institutions of the system in getting public services, people have always the right to ask for more. And we are there responsible and obliged to respond always positively. So not consumers are always right, but citizens are always right. In this respect, digitalization or framing it in a like larger fashion, digital transformation, which is more than digitalization, I believe is the right way forward. So we shall embrace digital transformation. We should provide as much as possible e-services. There is almost no citizen over 16 years old without a phone. Some have 2 or 3. And I think that what citizens have in common and has become universal is this quest to become tech-savvy, which comes natural to youth, but there is a certain echo in other generations as well. So therefore, to increase the quality and accessibility of public services and to make people spend less money and time in leading their life as good as they can and want, digital transformation is here to stay and to both deepen and expand itself in the institutions of the system. So I think we are enablers. Yeah. We are a certain infrastructure to what people want, and I think that they definitely know very well what they want. So I don't belong to those who oppose digitalization or who perhaps not opposed to it, but they are too wary, too timid, too frightened, thinking of bad scenarios that might happen. I'm not saying that one should not mind them, but I don't think that digital transformation really has alternative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. And I think that highlights quite nicely this dichotomy between the digital sphere and everything that we need to be structured and governed and infrastructure related. And yet it's within a very, very human context: fear, safety, security, ensuring that people have access to economy and jobs and, let's say, industry. So I think it's a very important point, a pertinent point. And Anahita, maybe a question to you in this context. So digitalization thrives on global platforms, cloud providers, data flows, AI governance, and so on. But geopolitics is actually pushing a slightly different agenda. It's pushing for fragmentation, sanctions, controls. So perhaps in the context of that, how would you say it would be best for a country to actually, under these very strong geopolitical pressures, to provide evidence that it's actually safer and more resilient to, let's say, nearshore rather than farshore some of their industrial and digital, let's say, infrastructure?
I mean, it's pretty obvious fragmentation is something that we have to deal with, and I think it's also important not to be naive about it, because if we look at what we are seeing as Europeans, is that we're asked to choose platforms to who we collaborate with. We are asked to choose. But the factual realities at the moment is that we don't want to choose, and economically it's not possible to choose at this point in time. So while we accept the fact that fragmentation is something that some really want to happen, for a country like Germany, there is basically not a choice to be taken at this point in time, because obviously we are an export nation and we are using digital platforms that are necessary for us to operate properly. So there is, at this point in time, I think having sovereignty in the positive sense, and not just about data sovereignty, but just, understanding and having a confidence around who we are and what we do, and it is, I think, given the geopolitical circumstances, really key. I think we're going to talk about the trade component to this, and we can talk also then about the relevance around how trade flows and supply chains can become resilient using digital platforms and using also blockchain to really track firsthand. But just pause there for the other panelists to think about, what does it actually mean? It's not just data sovereignty, but really it's about confidence in where we are and who we are.
Yeah, absolutely. And perhaps to you, Tanja, I think that confidence and that trust is really critical, and not only in the geopolitical and the political environment, but also in the business environment and the leadership environment. So how do we ensure that as business leaders, as country leaders, we're also setting the scene for some of this shifting organisational culture away from being lean at all costs and saving costs to actually investing in this kind of technology and nearshoring and bringing things, let's say, to be more sovereign? You actually need to spend more money maybe and more time and more effort.
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much to be on this panel, and I'm really impressed how many of you made it up here in this really beautiful place. I think it's definitely worth the trip. Thank you for the invitation as well. And I can congratulate, because that's part of the answer. If the state leaders really embrace digitalization as part of progress, of social well-being, of really getting forward, that's a first part of the answer, because we very often see leaders are talking about digitalization, but not really embracing it in their policies. And we all know it might be costly in some effect, but if you really think in return on investment, it's going to be so much cheaper. Just one example, if you look at the energy transformation, you talk a lot about energy transformation. If you just think it in infrastructure ways, then it's going to be much more costly as if you combine it with digitalization, because the energy transformation is also a flexibility transformation. And if you want to integrate all the different sources of energy into one system, it's not going to work if you do it the old way. So digitalization is actually one topic that's in every single activity we do. If you talk about bureaucracy, if you talk about social services, if we talk about transformation of our very heavy industries, etc., it's always there. And if you think it this way, it's not a burden anymore, but it's really a means to get much faster forward. And if we talk about sovereignty, we really need to talk about one thing and one topic first. Can we really manage our digitalization? Do we know what we are talking about? But because we cannot change something we don't understand. And therefore it's so important that you really set the scene on top, because from our your very young citizens, but also the very young citizens in Germany and all over Europe, I mean, this has already taken place, but the middle part still needs to get going.
If I may, during current and previous mandates that we've been in the government, we have enacted and exercised democracy as rule of law, where the will of the majority transposed itself into a new legislation and into a new higher level of respect for existing legislation. And in this way, democracy was thriving through rule of law, because law is something that unites us and increases social cohesion. On the other hand, I'm tempted to think of digital sovereignty by the means of cybersecurity. So just as we think of democracy by the means of rule of law, let's try and think of digital sovereignty by the means of cybersecurity. After several decades of intense globalization, with these current geopolitical turbulence and disruption of trade routes in the world, it is my impression that continents are back. So continents are back on the world stage. And Europe should also think of itself as a factor and actor on stage, on the world stage, because continents are back. So when I speak of nearshoring and friendlyshoring, I speak first and foremost for business process outsourcing in our country from our continent where we belong. In this sense, I think that definitely digital transformation can help, because will make things much easier. However, we should not lose critical aspects of our thinking, in the sense that big data shows that it reflects historical bias and structural imbalance. Therefore, we have to mind not only how we are doing things faster and cheaper, but also, as old Latin saying goes, cui bono, who benefits.
Yeah.
We have to see where the accumulation of capital is happening, besides circulation of capital. So the vast amount of circulation of capital shall not make us negligent towards spots of accumulation of capital. So who is profiting is a legitimate question for public and for the government, for civil society, and not only for the businesses. In this sense, I believe that it's important to try and think of AI revolution as something which still has to be tested. And the main test, in my view, is the one of contribution into increasing economic growth and decreasing social inequality. Famous French writer Albin Kurti said that after every revolution, the role of the state increases. So if we see AI revolution as a revolution, I don't think that this means that the role of the state will decrease. On the contrary, it will increase. Yeah. And here I see a certain locus for problematizing shortcomings in digital sovereignty.
Yeah. And we'll come back, I think, to the topic of how do you, let's say, set the scene for that kind of multi-state, multi-actor let's say, collaboration to make sure that you're set up for that kind of growth. But Anahita, I think maybe taking that topic about how the state sets up and how other actors have that role to play and participate when we're talking about foreign direct investment, when we're talking about investors investing in new technologies and new competition. How do you see compliance, standards and benchmarks and baselines and so on? How are they? How is compliance needed to actually become a competitive advantage for countries, but also for business leaders who are deciding to invest in one state or another? What kinds of conditions, what kinds of standards need to be fixed and set in your context?
You know, I just give you the example from Germany. Germany is an export nation. At the same time, we have to source a lot of products from other countries. And one component really is key. This is predictability and transparency. When you look at supply chains and trading partners, when you cannot rely on them to deliver in time, what kind of value do they really give to you? So for a very long time, we have been working towards having the super efficient and very, as cheap as possible trading partners. What we're seeing right now is driving towards efficiency is not enough. We have to drive towards resilience. So we have to think both at the same time, which is super, super challenging. Because as we all know, if you as a consumer have the choice, there are few that are willing to buy the more sustainable product. There is a margin that is acceptable to consumers, but it's not too high. So what I would say as a country, as a state, you want to have, and the Prime Minister alluded to that, the rule of law, meaning you have clear laws, smart regulation, not overburdening, but at the same time accepting the fact that you are basically a country that wants to have trading partners, that they want to rely on, that law is enforced in your country properly. At the same time, on business level, you want your contracts to be clear. You have, clauses that work for both sides, win-win situations. And then there are lots of things that you can really work on, because what we have seen in the past 2 decades is that compliance expectations went up, but resilience also goes up when you have proper, smart contracts that work for both sides, right? If it's overburdening one side only, it's not going to be a very sustainable relationship. But if you work towards a win-win situation, I think that's where also on the business level it may work. And I think one more thing that the Prime Minister alluded to, which I would like to pick up in this context, because while we are talking about resilience, cybersecurity is something that I think still, while we're talking about it for more than a decade, it's absolutely underestimated. More money has to go into this by every single state in Europe. And I think all leaders, be it business, but also being, of course, government leaders, putting a focus there is money well spent.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tanja, I mean, you already alluded to the needing to be able to manage digital transformation and digital transition extremely well. And I think in the context of the SPD Wirtschaftsforum, it would be interesting to get your perspective on how you ensure that politics and research and industry actually work very well together to ensure, for example, that the speed of technology and the growth that we need matches then the speed of governance that's actually governing then that rollout of new technologies and new digital governance.
Yeah, and I think this is really one of the key questions, because we are in a field where actually nobody knows what is going to happen next in the AI revolution. And if you want to regulate something that you don't know yet, and then you regulate it too fast, then it might really kill all initiatives, and that's what we quite often see and witness. So it's really a very challenging time to find the nice balance between this experimental age, and we are in an experimental age, and allow this experiments even in Europe. There we are not so much used to it, but at the same time keep the conversation up with the regulators, with the compliance insurers, to be able to frame a reliable setting where what you said, Prime Minister, is so important that business can really rely on certain topics. That is so important that can be an asset for the European Union and at Europe in itself, because I absolutely agree with you also that we are getting more into this multipolar world, and Europe has to find its place. And it can actually, and in the Economic Forum of the Social Democrats, we do have, for example, one nice setting where we try to organize this talk between politics, economy, and the science in order to find this right balance. And I can tell you, we have quite some heated discussions.
I'll bet. So maybe one final question to the Prime Minister, and then perhaps we have time for 1 or 2 questions before we wrap up. So I think you've been extremely good and foremost possibly in Europe in terms of using digitalisation for nation building and really building a narrative about what digitalisation means, what tech means, what talent development in this space means for a nation and your position on the world stage. And I think maybe just to dig a little bit further into a topic that you brought up to start with, what kind of policy environment, what actors are required, particularly when we're talking about a very human transition, what kinds of actors are required at the state level to make sure that these kinds of changes can be managed well and are effective and can contribute to the kind of growth that you mentioned in your opening speech?
I'm afraid I cannot claim as much credit as you prescribed to me. I think that we as a government were ready for the readiness that we encountered. Tech sector was already doing well. We just understood well that we need to help them further. So, you know, you don't have to see problems when they are not there. So there is this tendency, once you're in power, to think of yourself as someone who can fix problems and offer solutions. But sometimes, you know, people are good. People are thriving. People have imagination and memory. They are leading their lives. So there are a lot of good things already happening. Perhaps just help them further and engage with them and see how they can do ever more and ever better. So our approach has been positive, not negating what we see among society, but on the contrary, offer better public services to the public, to the people. And on the other hand, the negativity has rather been preserved in political struggle with opponents. So it's better negativity to leave it in the field of ideas and arguments with the opposition, whereas towards the people, try to see good things and help them furthermore. In this respect, I think it worked well, and we also tried to combine both, let's say, normative justice kind of approach to decision-making, which of course sounds more Kantian, like reason as a source of morality. But we combine this also with more of utilitarian aspect, which is John Stuart Mill, you know, maximum happiness for maximum number of people. So utilitarianism and normativity. We combine this quite well. To be honest, I'm not sure that we are fully aware how well it was. But by staying attached to people all the time, by not feeling of ourselves as being above them, or by any means unique, we managed to combine well these two aspects of life, I would say. Whereas regarding state officials, cabinets of the ministers, perhaps we have had a very peculiar approach to morality, namely Aristotelian virtue ethics. You really need people on the lead with many virtues, not 2 or 3, rather like a dozen. Because we are a relatively not big country with enemy out of a bigger neighbor. And we needed best people to be on the lead. But never forgetting that these best people actually come from the people. So in best people, let us not forget the word people and focus only on the best. So this this triangle, if I may say so, of Immanuel Kant, John Stuart Mill, and Aristotle, both in our decision-making and cadre policy, human resources, to our knowledge, which is still scarce because we never had the proper time to look back, has proven to be generally successful. This does not mean that there can be no failures in the future, This means that we have to critically view also the success in order to be able to repeat it.
Thank you. I think fitting words to perhaps open up to two questions. I think this very human context is a very important point, and I think you give rather big boots to fill in terms of understanding your audience and understanding the people who are coming through and taking those leadership roles. So, do we have any questions for the panel? Don't be shy. I'm sure there's some very interesting topics that have been brought up this evening. Yeah, please.
Thank you very much for this fabulous panel, of course, and Prime Minister. And my name is Aliani Salahimi. I'm from Zurich, but my blood is Albanian. My parents are from Jilan. My question is regarding Kosovo currently as a near or offshore service place for European countries, and currently the competition, for example, like countries as Poland, Romania, and so on. So how is Kosovo building on that competition, and what are like the next movements Kosovo is currently discussing about to get the lead in this kind of industry?
I think that we are a very convenient place with a plethora of advantages for foreign investment. FDI doubled during our mandate, but what is not happening is, we believe, not sufficient amount of acknowledgement and affirmation of Kosovo as a success story. On one hand, a success story of humanitarian military intervention of NATO to stop Serbian genocide, and then to open opportunities for people to flourish, to rebuild the country, to bring justice for the sufferings of the past, but at the same time to have long-term peace and sustainable development. And on the other hand, we are a success story of having economic growth and development hand in hand with democratic progress. When it comes to, for example, prestigious international organizations for political rights, civil liberties, safety of towns to walk at night, or anti-corruption, or economic growth, like IMF and World Bank and World Justice Project and Freedom House and Gallup International and VDEM, electoral and liberal democracy, we are either first or second in Western Balkan 6. So this double success story somehow is not having the proper affirmation to turn us into a magnet for what we believe we deserve. And that is ever more investments in our country. There are so many colleagues of yours who are investing in Kosovo. For example, in the municipality of Štime, not very far from capital city Pristina, they are producing kitchens for Switzerland. They export kitchens to Switzerland, and they are importing raw material wood with ISO standards from Austria. And Austria and Switzerland are neighboring countries. So there are so many success stories of entrepreneurs from our diaspora coming back home and then exporting to Western Europe. But I think that as if some strategic communication or like qualitative PR is missing, we don't get our fair share in continental acknowledgement of this double success story. So I think here we need to work more.
So I'll wrap up. thank you very much, panellists, for joining. Thank you again for hosting us here on behalf of the Foreign Council on Economic Relations. Great to be here, very much enjoyed the discussion, and I think we can certainly take away with us that digitalisation is very much in the fore, it's an important topic, and it's absolutely something that we should be discussing this week in Davos. So thank you.